99X. It's the Morning X, Barnes and Leslie. A lot of you, like us, probably still have the horrific accident that happened last week still on your mind. That's hard to watch.
It's an ongoing story, what happened, in Baltimore.
The Baltimore bridge, they came down, and think about the heroes that saved lives that were quickly dispatching information to stop the cars on the bridge. Because when you're watching that time lapse of the bridge, and you see the headlights of cars, and you see the bridge getting closer and closer, can you imagine being that last car or truck that got past, and you look in your rear view, and it just collapses?
The video is haunting.
Haunting. Check out some of this communication if you haven't heard. This was the emergency communication to stop all the traffic from the bridge right before it happened.
I need one of you guys on the south side, one of you guys on the north side, hold all traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we got to stop all traffic. I'm en route to the south side. Yeah, if we can stop traffic, just make sure no one's on the bridge right now. There's a crew up there. You might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily. 10-4, once the other unit gets here, I'll line up on the bridge.
C-13 dispatch, the whole bridge just fell down. Everybody, the whole bridge just collapsed.
Do we know if all traffic will stop?
I can't get to the other side, sir. The bridge is down. C-13, I'm holding all traffic northbound.
And then hearing him talk about the crew, that's just so freaking sad. I want to bring on Andrea Sachs from the Washington Post. Good morning, Andrea.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You've been busy.
I've been very busy.
Unbelievable.
I wish I weren't. Not fun stuff to cover.
Not just the Washington Post, but of course you're right there by Baltimore. And you had a really excellent piece that I think we should point to, how to escape if your car goes underwater. Because there's a lot of assumptions made, and a lot of people have this fear, including my wife, who
I have this fear.
To a bridge. You
if
too?
I see this in a movie, about cars submerging into water. If I see this in a movie, I start thinking, how am I going to get out? Can I roll the window down? Can I open the door? And then I'll have nightmares about it.
Well, some of the stuff you hear over the years, some of it just isn't true. And Andrea wrote a great piece. Why did you get chosen to write this piece anyway? Did you?
I didn't have a fear of it. And it's so funny because I feel like in daily life, we always think about these things like if there's a car accident or you're in a plane and I don't know, like the panel falls off. Like I feel like we're kind of prepared for some things. This is something I don't think many of us think about unless you have a phobia of it, which more and more people are really sharing that they have this fear.
Well, take us through this article. If this happens to you and you are submerged, realistically, how much time do you have to get out of the car?
You have a minute. You have a minute, which is shocking because I can't get anything accomplished in a minute. So the idea is that you need to get out before the car submerges, before the water rises and the physics change and the pressure start pushing at the door and the window, because then you have no chance of any kind of portal, any kind of opening. So the experts I spoke with said you need to get it almost when it's still in motion, when it's still kind of flying off the bridge. I don't want to freak anyone out, but before it hits the water, you need to follow he calls it SWOC, SWOC.
And what is that? That's good to memorize.
Yeah, so SWOC is seatbelt off, window open, out, and children. But according to my conversation, sometimes you have to do children first, especially little ones who can't swim. So you need to actually stay in the car and push them out because it's easier to push than to go out and pull.
But you're talking about in 1 minute. Like you said, 1 minute isn't long. And also newer cars, that tempered glass.
Yes.
People think they can just kick their window out, especially with newer cars. It's not going to happen. But how are you going to roll your window down? It's not like the old days where you crank the window down.
Crank it, right.
Right. And I think Hollywood does a disservice because they make it so dramatic, right? They use their boot and they kick it out. And you can't do that because, like you said, it's tempered, it's laminated. Even some of those tools that they sell, hammers, first of all, you have to find it. And I think most of us keep stuff in the trunk. So you don't want to waste your time going in the trunk. And then most likely you won't be able to smash it. So you lose your minute. So really you just have to follow those 4 steps.
So in that minute, your car is still running when you have, heaven forbid, flown over a bridge or whatever, you end up in water, and you think the window stays working for that long?
My expert in Manitoba, who's done several tests on this, says yes. Because I asked about that. I asked about electric windows. Few of us have manual. and then even electric vehicles. And he said, it will work in that minute. He promised me.
I'm getting claustrophobia just thinking about this.
Well, think about your mind, though. If you're flying over a bridge or if you're falling into water, are you really going to think about, where do I have my tool to cut the seatbelt off? Or heaven forbid you don't have your seatbelt on because your head getting slammed around in there. But to remember to get that window down, I would think that would be the first one in your SWAC, seatbelts being first and then windows. Because wouldn't you want to make sure you get that window down, but then you have the clock ticking with water coming faster in your vehicle.
Right. I think the idea for the seatbelt is if maybe they also, one other little thing is that typically with deep water, the car will sink nose first. So almost like the Titanic. So like the bow first. So if you can get to a farther, like a window that's farther back, you can buy yourself a couple seconds.
And it says that most people will panic though, too. I mean, there's fear of panicking, heart attack, even before you think about anything else.
Right.
We're talking to Andrea Sachs, who wrote this incredible article for the Washington Post, How to Escape If Your Car Goes Underwater.
I mean, just looking at that bridge, when you look at the shots of the Baltimore Bridge from the water, that is so high up. And then to think about just you're driving, and then all of a sudden, a bridge falls out below you, your car starts tumbling, probably whichever side is heavier, and if you're in a car with a gas engine in the front, and you're just taking a nosedive. At that point, how are you not in shock? But to start thinking about how to get out, your mind probably thinks kick the window. Man, with the pressure of the water, no chance.
Now, Andrea, I understand that there's a service for people that don't even want to go over a bridge, right? That will drive you. Is that real?
Yeah, it really is. And it's been around. It's been kind of a quiet program, except for people who obviously have this fear. And we found it in Maryland, of all places, the Bay Bridge. We found it in Virginia and Michigan. And they will, whether it's a private transportation company, but a lot of them are actually run by the bridge authority or the operators. You can be escorted by whether it's emergency drivers or police officers, and you just have to call anywhere from like 24 hours to even 10 minutes in advance and just say, I don't feel comfortable driving across the bridge. It'll be either end. They'll meet you at the point. They will drive you across, and then they don't expect any tips.
Wow.
And then they just will catch a ride back to their starting point. And so these have been going on. One of them was 2006, but it's been around for at least 20 years, if not more so. Sometimes it was informal, but now they actually have formal programs. And I imagine they're going to get even more formal now as more people call for help.
Well, here's a stupid question. How does that help the situation?
It does not. That's a great question.
Doesn't.
It does not. It gets you across the bridge one time.
When my wife gets near a bridge, she starts like almost hyperventilating about, the distance of the bridge, how high the bridge is, or whatever. And I've never really been affected. And I grew up in a city with a similar bridge like the one in Baltimore that I would cross every day to go to high school. And sometimes we would get, it would get shut down. You have to just sit on the bridge, sometimes for an hour. Yeah. But what does it help if someone drives you across?
It does. It's a one-time thing. The clinical psychologist I spoke with, or psychiatrist, said that you need exposure and you need to be able to do this yourself. So you can't always say, this is a Band-Aid, but not a long-term solution.
I've never seen that bridge in real life. What are people going to use to get across that area now? Is there another way nearby?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I don't go to Baltimore. I've always used the tunnel. I've rarely used that bridge. It goes to the port. They're working hard. I think they're building, I don't think they're building, but they're definitely reinforcing other bridges in the area.
Wow.
But I'm not quite sure what they're doing. But I haven't heard, there have been travel woes, but not as bad as one would think.
Man, that's a big bridge. That is just...
It affects the port, too. Yeah. Like the cruise ships are having to find other areas. We've already had problems with cargo ships and freight. And so I think we're going to see, we could even see like higher prices now because goods can't get into that port. It's a major area on the East Coast.
Well, our hearts go out to the families affected by this. And this is just such an awful, awful tragedy. And even for the guy or the guys driving that barge, who are going to live with this.
Exactly.
This is just horrific. Well, Andrea,
we encourage everyone to read your article.
Yeah. Look it up. How to escape if your car goes underwater. There's some more points in there, at least to keep fresh in your mind. You never know.
Plant it in your head.
Yeah. I want to end with a clip of a guy saying what not to do if your car is submerged in water. And it's kind of obvious, but to be honest, these days, a lot of people might think to do this first. Don't do it. Andrea, thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me.
We live in a society now when anytime there's an emergency, what's the first thing people do? They take out their cell phone and they want to film it. No. Do these dress rehearsals in your mind. I call them fire drills for life. Listen, we have so many things that come up. Active shooters, plane emergencies. This is another one to add to the list. Just spend a couple of dollars. That makes sense. Have that seatbelt cutter. Have that glass break, sway yourself away. So God forbid this happens, you're good to go.
The Morning X with Barnes and Leslie, 99X.